Okay, so today we're going to discuss the famous story in the Gemara about Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua had many arguments, which led to Rabbi Gamliel losing his position and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah taking over the leadership of the Jewish people. And the arguments between them caused some controversy among the sages of Israel, because it seemed that Rabbi Gamliel was externally, it looked like his position was in short, it seemed like Rabbi Gamliel, in the stories in the Gemara, was going too far in his requests of Rabbi Yeshua. And that's why the sages sought to depose he should be taken down from his position, and that someone else instead of Elazar ben Azariah should become the new Nasi, the new leader of the Jewish people. But the truth is that Rabbi Gamliel wasn't going too far. Everything Rabbi Gamliel did had meaning. Rabbi Gamliel's requests of Rabbi Yeshua, which seemed to be chutzpahdik, insolent, had very deep meaning, and they were precise. So we began discussing this yesterday. On one occasion, Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua had an argument about what day was Rosh Chodesh, and thus it was the month of Tishrei, and the argument led naturally to when is Yom Kippur. So Rabbi Gamliel requested Rabbi Yeshua that he should come to him on the day that he said was Yom Kippur with his staff and with his money pouch. Another text in the Gemara from Ritz Chayes who says he asked not just to come with his money pouch, but to come with his tarmilai. Tarmilai is sort of like his satchel, his backpack, things that he carries all of his needs. So the question is, why did Rabbi Gamliel insist that Rabbi Yeshua should come to him with his money pouch and with his staff on the day that he said is Yom Kippur? It would make more sense, since we're talking about Yom Kippur, should come to him with a bagel and lox. Why did Rabbi Gamliel insist he come to him with his staff and with his money pouch? Let's see him inside. We are on page 126, the bottom of the page. We just finished concluding, but we just concluded the part that we read in Sif Vav so far by saying that what's unique about halachic ruling, why halachic ruling is called a halachic, cause it brings peace, is because once the halacha is set, it's not that everyone nullifies their opinion to the authority of the majority, but rather the halacha is issued from the entire Jewish court. The halacha incorporates all angles, and it is the halacha of the whole court. That doesn't mention it here, but the Gemara says that if the court gives a ruling and one of the judges says later on, oh, by the way, I was the one who said that you were innocent, but everyone else said you were guilty, even if it doesn't go so far as saying it to an interested party, but just saying his opinion later, the Gemara says it's forbidden, and the Gemara says pretty negative things about this guy who does this. A Megalo Seid, who he's saying secrets, you're not allowed to do that. So on the surface now, I'll do that because it disrupts the power of the Jewish court and makes rift. And in Yiddish's expression, Shtal Fislach, you're causing people to have discord between each other, and you're ruining the whole aura of what the court's about. But based on what we're learning here, it's not just because of what might happen later. That itself, that you're talking about your opinion afterwards, you have a different opinion, you have a dissenting view, that means that you're not really part of the court. Being part of the court means that this now becomes your opinion. You've heard what the Bezdin has said, and now you agree with this because this is now your own opinion. You've now delved deeper into this. You said, if Hashem has ruled this way, there must be a reason. Why did Hashem say this? Even though you know Yankel and Shmerel, they're part of the same Bezdin as you, and you disagreed with them yesterday, and you said they were wrong, and you argued for 2 hours why you were right and they were wrong, but then they were the majority and the Halach was ruled according to them. Okay, the Eibusher said that they were right. Why? and you come around and this becomes your opinion. Let's start actually from the top of 126. This is the power of Torah. The pasuk says God gives strength to his people. God will bless his people with peace. At first, when a court sets to determine halacha of any issue, there is a thrust and parry, there is a back and forth. There are ideas that go both ways. But when the court arrives at a decision, according to one of the opinions, there has to be some ois. Ois means power. God gives strength to his people. They have to make a strong decision and say, we're not going to listen to all of the arguments of Yankel, although they were very persuasive. We're going to be very strong, and we're going to say, this is the halacha. We're going to ignore all the other, not ignore, but we're going to say this is the final ruling. Once God gives strength to his people and lets the court come to a decision, that grants the court peace. That brings all the opinions to come around to say this is the halacha within their entire being, so that there's true peace between them. There's no longer differences of opinion. The court is now one united court that is given a ruling that is issued from every member of the court. So Hashem oiz la'amiyitein, God gives strength to his people. God lets the court make a final ruling, and that is how God blesses us with peace, because the ruling isn't just the ruling of the majority. The ruling is the ruling of the entire court. I was ruling yesterday at length about the meaning of the three verses. When there are two verses that contradict each other, the third verse doesn't merely side to one of the two verses and lend its way to give the ruling according to one of the two verses. Rather, the third verse incorporates all the other two opposing verses and sheds light into their true meaning and how they're not really contradictory to each other. In a similar way, halacha is not a majority opinion vote. Halacha is the vote of the entire court. Okay, now let's get back to our story. According to this, we'll better understand this story that our sages have told us. When Rabbi Yeshua's calculation arrived at Yom Kippur being at a different day than the day that Rabbi Gamliel said should be the day of Yom Kippur, Rabbi Gamliel told Yeshua he should come to him on the day that he thought was Yom Kippur with his staff and with his money. And Yeshua did it. Rabbi Yeshua came to him with his staff and with his pouch. The eight movements understood. Kadesh Rabbi Yeshua Yereshu Yineg Lefir Rabbi Kvis Rabbi Gamliel Da'i Bekach Rabbi Yeshua Yaviv Yom Shachal B'Yom Kippurim Levicheshuvei B'Makam Meshav El Yavne Shoyes Mecha Gadol Yitzim Mitchum Shabbos Shema Hayel Tzarech Yeshu Yaviv B'Maklev Mesa. Why did Rabbi Gamliel insist that Yeshua come to him carrying his staff and carrying his money pouch? The very fact that he would come to Rabbi Gamliel, traveling outside the Tchum Shabbos, on Shabbos and on Yom Kippur, you're not allowed to travel more than 2,000 amas outside of your city, about 3,000, 4,000 feet. So because, hey, Mark, Shalom Aleichem. Because Rabban Gamliel lived in Yavne, and Rabbi Yeshua lived far from Yavne, if Rabbi Yeshua would just walk to Rabban Gamliel on the day that Rabbi Gamliel said was Yom Kippur, that would have already proved that Rabbi Yeshua submitted that halacha follows Rabbi Gamliel. Why did he have to make him come with his staff and his money pouch? So you might be thinking, because okay, that's such a lighter thing. It's not such a rabbinical prohibition. That's a biblical prohibition according to some, but it's not something. It is walking. We're talking about Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua, who is a tzaddik. Him transgressing this prohibition would mean the world to him. So if he would travel there, that would certainly indicate that he does agree that Rabbi Gamliel's halacha is correct. Why did Gamliel insist that in addition to walking to him, which was already a violation of Yom Kippur, if it would be Yom Kippur, he would have to come with his staff and his money pouch as well? Just parenthetically, Rapinya Korf sein gesund, just to tell you how weighty this prohibition is. I'm pretty sure, I think he was on Shlichus to New Haven for a certain period, and he once, doing a mitzvah, walked out of the city limits more than 2,000 amas. He asked the Rebbe for a tikkun, and if I remember correctly, the tikkun the Rebbe gave him was to do two things. One was to learn the Mittel Rebbe Shari Eira twice a year, and the other was to learn a section of Derech Chaim every day. A section of Derech Chaim, the previous Rebbe writes how Derech Chaim is the best plow for the heart. It's something that really makes you reevaluate your high and mighty horse that you're sitting on, and tries to brings humility and opens your heart. Anyways, he has to study that every single day. So it's not a light thing to travel outside the Tchum of Shabbos. But the question is, why did he make him do something more than that? Why did he make him carry his staff and his money pouch? One explanation is as follows. Rabbi Gamliel wanted Rabbi Yeshua to express that not only does he submit, putting his mind aside, that Rabbi Gamliel is the halachic ruling, Rabbi Gamliel's ruling is the correct halachic ruling, and although I disagree, I have to follow his opinion. He had to express more. He had to express his entire being, including his mind, agrees to this too. It wasn't sufficient that he would just do this and externally submit that this is the halacha because he says so and I disagree, but I have to follow his ruling because halacha follows his ruling. But I, in my mind, I agree with this. Next page, page 127. Although a moment ago he had disagreed and he said that according to the logic of Torah, Rabbi Yom Kippur should be on a different day than Rabbi Gamliel. After the halacha was ruled according to Rabbi Gamliel, he agrees with this. Not only does he agree to follow it, but he agrees with this in his mind and in his understanding. His understanding says that this is actually not Yom Kippur. That makes sense to me. And the litmus test of his adherence to Rabbi Gamliel's halachic ruling being not just something that he submits to externally, but actually in his mind, intellectually, he submits to Rabbi Gamliel's ruling completely, is by him bringing his money pouch and his staff. That indicates that this ruling of Rabbi Gamliel has permeated his entire being. Every detail of his life is affected, even things which seem so external. But not just his staff, which a staff is used, use a staff, a cane to help you walk. Even his money, which is something completely external to himself, that also joined his trip to Yavne. So I know Yonatan is wondering, well, he could have done that externally as well. He could have, you said to bring the staff, I'm going to bring the staff. He could have said to bring the stick, I'm going to bring the stick because you said so. But the idea of Rabbi Gamliel telling him to go with his staff and with his money pouch was meant to suggest and to ask of Rabbi Yeshua, I don't want you just to arrive here. I don't just want you to be here physically. I want you to be here completely with your mind and say this to yourself, this isn't Yom Kippur. Rabbi Gamliel didn't want Rabbi Yeshua just to come. He wanted him to come with his whole being. And by saying to him, bring your money pouch or bring your staff, he was saying to him, I want you, like we learned yesterday, I want you to understand why this isn't Yom Kippur. I want this to make sense to you so that you're walking to Yom Kippur, not like you're hard knuckling it and you're carrying your staff every second and thinking, oh my gosh, what am I doing? This is Yom Kippur. I want you to come to me completely and realize that this is actually in your mind, this isn't Yom Kippur, that it makes sense to you. That's the meaning of halachic ruling. Halachic ruling is something that is Hashem issues it, and therefore it has to permeate us completely, and we have to not just agree this is the halacha, but this has to be our own halacha that makes sense to us. Even though a moment ago I was of the opposite opinion. Everyone follow so far? Okay. So this will now help us understand why only when the Jewish people arrived at Mount Sinai to get the Torah, only then was there peace. There was no other peace before this. To explain this, Rebbe is going to explain a very famous teaching of the Gemara, which says, if someone tells you that there is wisdom by the Gentiles, you should believe them. If someone tells you they have Torah, do not believe them. The Gemara makes a distinction between Torah and wisdom and says the Goyim do have Torah, but they do have wisdom, they do not have Torah. So that means that Torah isn't wisdom on the one hand. That's what it sounds like. Torah, they have wisdom, they don't have Torah. On the other hand, what the Gemara says seems to contradict in a clear verse in the Torah. The Torah says that the Gentiles recognize that the Jewish people have a wisdom that they don't have. In the words of the Torah, Ki chachmaschem uvinaschem la'einei amin. It is your wisdom and your understanding to the eyes of the Gentiles. The Torah gives us wisdom that the Gentiles respect as being uniquely Jewish. That's why they call us the people of the book. That we got something they don't have. So if the Torah says that Gentiles have wisdom and they don't have Torah, it sounds like they have more wisdom than us. But that's not what it means. It must mean that we have more wisdom than them. They also have wisdom. But the Torah has something in the wisdom arena that is greater and surpasses the wisdom of the Gentiles. We'll see what that is. And there's another thing we have called Torah. So we have Torah and we have wisdom, and it surpasses that the Gentiles have, but they also have wisdom. So we need to understand, first of all, what is unique about the wisdom part of Torah, and what makes it uniquely Torah, that our wisdom is part of our Torah, and what is their value of wisdom, and how is it different than the wisdom of Torah? Let's go. What this means is like this. It is true that the Torah is called wisdom. As the Torah says, it is called your wisdom and understanding. However, there's a unique quality in Torah that wisdom does not organically possess. There's something that Torah possesses that wisdom unto itself does not possess. As our sages say, if someone tells you the Gentiles have wisdom, believe them. If someone tells you they have Torah, don't believe them. If the Goyim have wisdom, it seems that the virtue of Torah is not wisdom. So why does the Torah say that it's called your wisdom to the eyes of the Gentiles? If that's not the unique quality of Torah, then why does the Torah say that it is? Torah is called the wisdom that you have that Gentiles recognize as being wise. What this means as follows is, before I continue, I just want to point out, we discussed this a few weeks ago, but it's something that really deserves repetition and deserves focusing on. The Rebbe says when a Jew goes out to do business, he has to feel like he is a shliach of Hashem, that he is going to do a mission of Hashem. And he has to feel that the business arena in his life is not something that's separate from his religious life. And then we give the example of not just dressing in a way that's proudly Jewish, in a way that's obviously Jewish, but more, Rebbe said that when you're discussing with your Gentile partner or business acquaintance a deal, and you should be so attached to your not just observance of Judaism, but the Torah that you study, so that when your Gentile friend says to you, "What are you thinking about?" you should say, "I'm thinking about this concept in Torah." It should be on your mind, and you should share it. And you should share it and say, "This is why I think we should do this and this thing in the business, because this is something that I learned in our Torah." That we have to be proud of who we are, not just when we're sitting in the synagogue among Jews. We have to be proud of who we are in anywhere, whatever we're doing. Dress like proudly Jewish. As I shared with the story of Dr. Avram Turskel, which almost passed away, how he was once on a line to go on a flight, and this lady said to him, "Hey, you guys are so terrible. You embarrass us all. It's a shanda and a busha. It's an embarrassment how you dress. You dress different than everybody else. You always wore the whole Hasidic frock coat and everything, the kapata." She said, "You embarrass us all." So he responds to her in perfect Oxford English, "I'm sorry, madam. I don't understand your verbiage, you see, because I'm Amish." "Oh, I'm so sorry. I love you people. You maintain your tradition." "Aha," said Dr. Tversky. If I'm Amish, you respect me. If I'm Jewish, you don't. We can't be that way. We got to be proud of who we are, proud of our Torah, not just proud of our Jewish smarts, and proud of our Torah being the source of our wisdom. So, what is uniquely Torah about the wisdom of the Jewish people? What is the wisdom of Torah, and how is it different than the wisdom of the Gentiles? The Torah recognizes Gentiles have wisdom as well. Let's go. Because the Torah exists in our people, and Goyim don't have it, we have a different kind of wisdom as well. We have a greater wisdom too. That Goyim have wisdom by itself. Without Torah, they're missing something in their wisdom. That's why the Torah is called your wisdom, your unique wisdom that no one else has. Because you have Torah, you also have unique wisdom. The unique power of the Torah's wisdom is that the word Torah means, what is Torah? The Zohar says Torah means instruction. The Torah of truth doesn't only explain the truth of everything. Rather, Torah brings a conclusion of what that means, how you should live. This is the truth, and therefore you have to do A, B, and C. Parenthetically, this is also, no offense to all the men sitting here, this is also what women mean when they say that men are dumb. What do they mean? Are we stuck at dumb? Aren't men more intellectual? What do women mean when they say men are dumb? So here's one thing that they mean. They may mean many things, but what I discovered is that one of the things that women mean when they say men are dumb is as follows. Gemara says there is no peace that comes from an argument. In the middle of an argument, it has never happened in history that a husband and wife are in the middle of an argument, and then the wife says, I didn't know that. You're right. So an argument never brings to peace. But yet you dig your heels into your side of the court, and you say, I disagree, and you argue. And the argument that you have, yeah, you're right. You have a point, okay? But your argument and your opinion is actually not going to get you any closer to where you want to get to. You're arguing. You're actually messing up the whole shalom bayis. You're messing up the whole peace at home for the sake of winning the argument. So you might be right, but it's not bringing to the result. It's not bringing to where you want to get to. It's just causing discord. You've proved your point. What for? So that's the difference between Torah's wisdom and the wisdom of the nations. The Torah is about not just what the truth of everything is, but what do you have to do because of that. Torah is about hira. Torah is about instruction. Torah is about, and therefore you should do A, B, and C. Other kinds of wisdom do not dictate any kind of instruction. We see this in our time more than any other. In our time, there is no such thing in the secular world, in the world of academia. There's no such thing as right and wrong. There is just perspective, right? You can't say you have to act a certain way. The only rule that there is there are no rules, and that everyone has a right to their own perspective, whatever. That's the new religion. So all wisdom can say is, if you do A, the result will be B. But I don't say you should act that way. I could tell you if you do A, it's going to be B. But the way wisdom works organically is that wisdom has no conclusion. Wisdom just says what should happen if you do A, B, and C. Wisdom is about revealing the truth of things. Wisdom is not about instruction what you should do. We'll take an example of medicine. The wisdom of medicine says that if you act a certain way, the result will be the following. You will have the following result. But that doesn't dictate to you that you have to act that way. I was talking to a doctor the other day, and he said to me that many doctors will tell their patients to do something, and the patient will say, but can I get away with doing A, B, and C? And the doctor will not dig his heels in and say, no, you have to do the way I said it. The doctor will only say, well, if you do it this way, this will happen. You could do it that way too. The doctor doesn't Dr. worth his salt, will also say, if you do that, this is how it's going to ruin your life. But the doctor will not necessarily do that because he wants to keep his patients. So wisdom of medicine says, if you do A, B, and C, the result will be whatever it's going to be. But it doesn't say you have to act that way. If you want to hurt yourself, you could. It's up to you. But the Torah says you're not allowed to hurt yourself. The Torah doesn't just say what will happen. The Torah says what you have to do. If your doctor says this is something that will affect your health, you now look at the Torah and the Torah says, that means I got to do this. This is something I got to do. It's a whole different thing. It's no longer a medical advice. It's now God's will. It's a different thing. That's why Torah is called your wisdom to the eyes of the Gentiles. Next page 128. Because the Torah is about instruction, so because the Torah is about the result, when you have to give a conclusion about anything, you go far deeper into the discussion. When you want to know what the conclusion is, the discussion is far deeper. But only because you want to get the result, do you get to you want to know what the result of what I should do is, do you probe into the depth of the concept? Therefore, Torah, which wisdom is built into Torah. The wisdom of Torah is about what should you do. That's what Torah is. Torah is about what you should do. Since the wisdom of Torah is about instruction, therefore it's a lot deeper. Therefore, it has a far more, it forces you to go a lot deeper into the subject matter because you have to know what to do. If you just have to analyze and give a diagnosis, you're not going to use the deepest part of your brain as if you have to give advice on what actually has to happen. If you have to not just give advice, but you have to actually say, this is what really has to happen right now, you're going to have to go to the depth of the idea. That's why the Torah's wisdom is a total different kind of wisdom. And the Jewish wisdom, which emanates from Torah, is a different kind of wisdom. It's about what has to get done. It's a different perspective. Parenthetically, I just want to point out, the Rebbe said another fascinating thing about the wisdom of Torah, not so relevant to our discussion, but fascinating nonetheless, on the same subject. When the Jewish people were in Egypt, before the Torah was given, they were slaves. And the way it worked in Egypt, not just with the Jewish people, but in history until that time, there were the elite, the intellectual elite, who knew more or less whatever their sciences and their wisdoms led them to know at that time. And the mass population was unaware of all that stuff. They didn't know they just knew the instruction. This is what the sorcerers say. This is what the wise men say. This is what you got to do. The information was never shared. They never shared with the people what they knew. So there was mass ignorance. People didn't know. A lot of people didn't know anything because they didn't need to know. Why share that? With the giving of the Torah, number one, all of the wisdom that was being shared was shared with everyone equally. 3 million people were present giving the Torah. Number two, one of the first things the Torah tells us is that you have to teach the Torah to everybody else. Everyone is obligated to teach and everyone is obligated to study. It changed the whole way that wisdom was shared. Wisdom became something that was owned by everyone. Wisdom became something that wasn't just relegated to the few people that were allowed to know about it. So that's just an aside. But for our purposes, what we learned today is what's unique about the Torah's wisdom is that the Torah, as we'll see tomorrow, the Torah is truth. And since Torah is truth, therefore it's practical. Because God's wisdom and truth in general is something that goes from the Hebrew word for truth is made up of 3 letters, Aleph, Mem, Taf. Aleph is the first letters, and Mem, although the Hebrew alphabet has 22 letters, but if you count the N letters, Mem Sofit and Tzadik Sofit and Nun Sofit, you'll discover that there are 27 letters, and the mem is actually the center of the Hebrew alphabet, and it is the second letter of the word of truth, and Taf is the last letter of the word of truth. So what is truth? Truth is something that is in all places and all times, from the beginning of the alphabet to the middle of the alphabet to the end of the alphabet, representing all places and all times. So because Torah is the wisdom of God, therefore the Torah has instruction in a practical, down-to-earth way. Because it is God's wisdom, it's truth, that's why it's application in this world. It's not like another facet of Torah. Torah also has application. The Torah is about truth. It's about God's truth, about God's wisdom. Since it's about God's wisdom, therefore it has far-reaching implications from the truth of Hashem to what has to happen over here. Anyways, that's what I wanted to share today. Any questions or comments? Okay. Dr. Resson, have a great day. Yonatan, have a great day. Chol Mordechai, have a wonderful day. Marcus, have an awesome day. David, have a great day. Jeff, wonderful day. Aryeh, sei gesund.